I am here with John Ramdeen. Lots to discuss, Mr. Ramdeen. Before we get into the current topics, I want your reaction to that main event at Bellator 155.
Oh my gosh. It just seems that, if you haven't seen it, Carvalho and Melvin Manhoef, when you think of Melvin Manhoef, you think about some of the most exciting fights in all combat sports.
This was not one of them.
This was definitely
wasn't one for the best of.
Yeah, exactly. It was very conservative, to say the least, and the fans were booing the entire time. A very disappointing main event.
How did you score that fight?
I gave it to Melvin Manhoef. I was very surprised that Carvalho somehow managed to retain his title. But I think most of the MMA community, combat sports community, feels that Melvin Manhoef was robbed, that he should have been awarded the championship.
I think when you look at that fight, the first round, that to me, almost nothing happened in this round. That was the one round I gave to Carvalho, but that was just one of those rounds where so little occurred that, that's one of the very few instances I think you could push for a 10-10. Outside of that, I gave all the other rounds to Manhoef. Yeah. I think at most there was one round in there that you could maybe go back and forth over, but this to me was just, I thought it was an awful decision, and even worse for Melvin Manhoef, who, if you feel was unjustly due with the scoring, there's no demand for a rematch after that 25-minute fight. I don't think there's any clamoring for a rematch either. So I think it was the worst of all situations.
Yeah, and I think when it comes down to it, yes, we understand what type of fighter Melvin Manhoef is, and I would imagine that the Bellator organization, as much as they would like to use him for Bellator MMA, he'll probably use more for Bellator kickboxing than anything else. That's his bread and butter.
Well, it's tough. He just lost that kickboxing fight and then arguably beat the middleweight champion. And I don't even think it's that much of an argument, to be quite honest. But that was Bellator 155 that we did want to touch upon. BJ Penn is off the UFC 199 card. He is not injured, but rather he disclosed the fact that back in March, he did use an IV, which is banned. You cannot be using an IV, and that is not just after weigh-ins. That's year-round. The thinking being that an IV, it can dilute your urine and it could possibly hide if you have substances in your body. So that is the thinking by USADA. And BJ Penn, he disclosed this. So it's not like he was trying to hide this fact. He just said he wasn't aware of this rule. I totally buy that as a reason when he discloses it. It's an unfortunate reason to be off a card when the guy, from his own words, is healthy enough to fight, and it's just simply, this is the new era that these guys have to be aware of this stuff.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. It seems like this whole BJ Penn return is just not meant to happen. All the allegations of sexual assault before that investigation, then Dennis Seaver falling out, and now this scenario with BJ Penn dealing with the IV. He says, well, I didn't realize it was supposed to be 365 days a year. You can go online, you can hear Marcus Davis, the Irish hand grenade, say it just doesn't make sense that this is the game. He understands that if it's during the weight cut or during your fight camp, but when you're so far out, it seems to not make sense. I understand they're trying to get the sport as clean as humanly possible, but there are some athletes that have been in this game for so long, it's very difficult for them to get used to all the changes.
Where do you look at this? Is there just not enough of an education process going on where the fighters are being made aware of all this? Does it ultimately come down on the fighters and their management? Listen, these are the rules that are out there. It's incumbent. This is your career. You have to be aware of this. The idea that, hey, I didn't know this substance was banned. I didn't know that I couldn't use an IV out of competition. This is your livelihood. Yeah. It's on you to be up on all the latest things that are occurring in your sport.
Yeah, it's true. But I think if you're a professional athlete and you've hired a team, you have a strength and conditioning coach and a nutritionist and all the people that help you, as well as your manager, you should be able to rely on the people that you are paying to help you achieve success. But at the end of the day, it should be the responsibility of the athlete. They should understand what's going into their system. However, you look at some of the wording of some of the stuff, like the weight deal right now when it comes to the UFC, they're saying that you're supposed to come in the week of the fight when you arrive to whatever pay-per-view or whatever fight night it is, it's 8% of your targeted weight for, so if you're 155 pounds, 8% of that. However, that's just a suggestion. We're not going to penalize anybody. We're not going to do anything. This is something we're going to tell our athletes, and hopefully they're going to adhere to these same rules. You can come in 50% heavier than your actual weight, and we're not going to do anything. So it just comes down to everybody being on the same page. They have to, whether it comes down to having the entire roster there to explain what are the goals, what are the steps in order for the sport to be the sport that they hope it's going to be. These are the steps. This is how we're going to implement things. And then by 2020, hopefully everybody's on the same page. But I don't think they're having those talks with the fighters.
I think that if you're USADA here, I applaud them for addressing significant issues in this sport. Yeah. I think it's a whole different topic if you want to discuss why the fighters, they don't get any say in this. It is dictated to them and they have to follow the procedures. That's a different topic. But for USADA, I mean, weight cutting is a massive issue and they're trying to change a culture of fighters that are used to extreme weight cuts for a vast majority of them. And big cuts, 20 plus pounds the week of, is not unheard of. They want to try and scale that down to 8%, which is roughly 13 pounds over, which it's still a cut, but we're not talking about dehydrating yourself to such a degree and going into a cage dehydrated. I think this is going to be a long evolutionary process for USADA, and I think that the idea is we're going to make this as easy for you. We want you guys to have it in your head. 13% is your target that Monday of fight week, that hopefully this does change, rather than a guy shows up 10% over and suddenly you're off the card. I don't know if that would necessarily be met with the same response.
Yeah, true, but at the same time, we're talking about changing the culture, and the culture of MMA is one thing, but remember, a lot of these athletes come from a different culture before they even get to the sport of mixed martial arts. Many of these athletes come from the wrestling world, and they're used to cutting weight. This is a part of their culture, so it's like, okay, well, I'm going to try to get myself the biggest advantage humanly possible. I've mastered the art of cutting weight. I can lose 25, 30 pounds. Again, I don't know how safe it is, but if you've talked to wrestlers, it's like that's all a part of the grind. You go through it, you do the things that you need to do to have the biggest advantage. So I think everything has to change across the entire board in order for things to, be level.
Well, this topic is only going to get louder as we get closer to UFC 199. You look at a fighter like Michael Bisping, who's taking this on 2.5 weeks' notice and getting down to a target area of 8% fight week, and then as well, these fighters that will have the option of weighing in earlier that Friday before 199 because it is in the state of California. This will be a big topic. Also want to make note that James Tahuna has officially announced his retirement, this coming after 4 consecutive losses in the UFC. Tried his hand at middleweight for a fight, then returned to light heavyweight, and probably the right call at his age.
I mean, sure. When you look at an athlete that enjoys mixed martial arts, you get to the highest level, and then you have a couple of setbacks. It's like, okay, am I making any money in one of the most difficult sports in the world? Maybe Tahuna's going to train people.
All right, programming note, this Thursday night we'll have our 1-hour preview show for the Fight Night card in Vegas, headlined by Thomas Almeida and Cody Garbrandt. That kicks off at 7 Eastern. And then the prelims of Sunday's card will be airing here in Canada on Fight Network with 4 fights from Vegas, including Sarah McMahon and Jessica Ai.